First of all, very, very technical question from my perspective. I read somewhere that the number of channels that we used for this film, around 61, something like that, is an extraordinary number compared to...
On production. I'm sure these guys did a lot more post-wise, but...
On production?
Yeah, during filming, yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about how that helped in the journey of the sound that we end up with?
Yeah, well, I think on the production side, we wanted to make sure that we were able to give them everything they needed, knowing that, if you don't give them enough, it's harder to recreate. If you give them too much and they don't need that much, you can delete that, so that's easier. So the idea is that every instrument, every performance was mic'd as though you were a live concert show. And then we also put, a 5.1 mic, a surround sound mic in the audience to capture that, and also various mics in the audience to capture different perspectives from the stage. So that right there is maybe 10 microphones just for audience cheers and claps and excitement. And every actor's radio mic'd, and then, even all the band members are, because from time to time they would interact with each other in that way. So the idea was just to capture as much as you could of all the music, all the instrumentation, all the singing, because since they're going to do everything live vocally, you had to make sure that you honored that in the ability to capture that feeling that you would have on stage.
Did Bradley Cooper have a general conversation with you guys about the various concerts and how the sound would affect an audience's emotional response to the way that it was presented to them? Just in terms of crowd volume in certain scenes, or if we're talking about the scene in the bar close to the beginning in the transvestite ballad, how the sound would be played differently?
I think on production we didn't have that. It was more or less just, let's get it, let's make sure to get it good. Also make sure that the idea was always that it sounded authentic to the audience. So I think these guys, took what we did on set and made that experience for the audience.
It was always about keeping everything as authentic as possible. Authentic being at the concerts, if you're on stage, this is how the sound is from the musician's perspective, as opposed to the audience perspective looking at the stage. When you're in the bar, it's all about contrast and dynamic. So we did have, it was always hammered in all of us about keeping it real, keeping realism. Once, never getting you, the audience, out of the movie. And that was our main goal, was to keep that. But also we always had to honor the actors. They gave 110%. We all had to step up and honor their performances, acting-wise.
And in terms of references, did Bradley Cooper sort of look back to previous concert films or films featuring live footage?
Well, from my understanding, he was backstage on a, a Metallica show? Mm-hmm. And that's where he was invited to that concert, and he was behind the drum kit, and I think that's where he saw that perspective and decided that's where the camera should be. It should never be in the audience, because this is a story about Allie and Jackson Maine's relationship, not about the audience's relationship to them. The concert audience, not the film audience. But so I think that's where he got that perspective for the first time, and kind of wanted to emulate that for the theatrical audience.
Tom, were you about to say something?
There was always definitely a very intentional plan, although I don't think we really had references, outside references, but every concert is totally unique. The crowds are all totally unique and very different sounding, mostly recorded in that actual venue. They're sweetened with other crowds from, most of the time, from the same venue, not necessarily that same moment, but just even the sound of the music, the sound of the crowds, everything is a deliberate, change from venue to venue, so that they're all unique and different, and the sizes all change and everything. So
it was also, and again, it just could be my impression of when I saw the film, but the relationship between sound and image, and not just the scale of the venue, but they much more than many other films that involve music. And
Yeah.
we'll get on to Bohemian Rhapsody, which does a similar thing in a moment. But
Right.
there was this very close relationship between the two.
Yeah, I think the idea is that, the camera is the audience, and if the camera is closer to that drum kit or closer to the guitar, that should be louder, as opposed to some, previous concert films or music films where it's just kind of a song that's being played out loud no matter where the camera is. So the idea of always having that perspective change, which is natural for any of us, if we're closer to anything, we hear it better. So I think that's where it really touches the audience and doesn't distract from the performance.
And
I think in-
the crowds as well.
Yeah.
Wherever the camera was pointing, the crowds did their thing and then went away in a transition that you didn't feel.
Yeah.
I think, in most, musical type films, the music is kind of like the king, and you don't mess with the music too much, and you kind of shape a lot of things around that. And in this case, as Steve was just saying, perspective changes a lot, and it's a lot of subtle perspective changes. So, when she's moving the microphone around, we're doing little moves to make it feel like that's actually what's happening. When the camera's swinging around, things move subtly so that you feel like you actually just moved with that camera change or the perspective change. And yet, never make you consciously think about that.
Yeah, I think when he's performs that first song at the opening of the film, and it's the stardom and all the chaos of being a rock star, and it comes into that door and it just shuts and goes really quiet. That kind of helps the audience to understand how I think his character is alone and lives in that silence. There might be all that rock fame and all that stuff, but as soon as he's alone, when the world goes quiet, his tinnitus kicks in, his drinking kicks in. Like, those are all the things that I think he copes with that silence.
I'm curious about the involvement that Lady Gaga had with sound in the film. Obviously, someone who's so used to working in a studio environment and having a very particular vision of what she should sound like.
Yeah, she was really concerned with the ambience out of the gate. Some of our early pre-production meetings, I mean, she really was, how are you guys going to create these reverbs and ambient spaces and all those things? So she really thought about the film as a whole, the soundscape as a whole, and her and Bradley were definitely on the same page. Like, every venue really needed to be authentic and true to the space.
Yeah, and her biggest concern that she let me know is, when she watches musicals or music films and people are talking and then the musical number starts, the whole world changes, sonically. And she wanted to avoid that at all costs because that throws all of us out of the movie and goes, okay, here comes the music. And I think so her goal was, look, I don't want that. And so this needs to be live from the gate. And so that's really what drove our attempt at recording those crowds and recording the spaces as much as we did, so that it wouldn't be this drop in ambience to nothing to all of a sudden the song starts playing.